Thank you to Toolbox, to John, to Tom. Appreciate you all inviting us to be here. And we're very appreciative of friends and family showing up today. And for those that we don't know, thank you for coming. And we hope that you get something out of this. I think I'm going to set the stage right off the bat here by telling you a story. It was many years ago. I was at the mansion for a rehearsal dinner. And the father of the bride got up. His name was Ray Williams. There's probably 150 people at the rehearsal dinner. And Ray was an oil man, kind of quiet, but very successful. And I would mention to you that there's nobody more fun than an oil man with money. So remember that. And he got up to talk, and he was introducing and thanking everybody just like John just did. And then he said, I need to stop for a second and just get this off my chest. He said, I have been listening for 3 or 4 months of my daughter Carol coming home and telling me that Bill, her fiance, is just so smart and he's so kind, he's so generous, so sweet, that he is just the most perfect man in the whole world. He said, I'm here to tell you right now there were only 2 perfect men in the whole world, Jesus Christ and my wife's first husband. I want you to know that neither one of us are perfect men. We don't fit that description by any means. But on a serious note, you know, in the book of Job, it says, does not long life bring understanding? And I think Bob and I feel that it does. We've lived a long time. We hope to share today with you some nuggets of truth about life, about our faith, and also about business. We're going to jump into that for a second. I do want you to recognize that we don't have all the answers by any means. We don't claim to do that. As Jeff Swope says, we're broken men just trying to get by, standing on our faith with the Lord. We don't always know the mind of God, and we're reminded of that on a daily basis. But one thing we do know for sure, we can trust the heart of God. There are 3 stages, really, that you should think about as a Christian, man or woman. First stage is when you obviously accept Christ as your Lord and Savior. And you're all excited about it, right? And your life is going to change in many ways. They give you a book, right? You're going to dive into God's Word. And the middle stage of that Christian walk is you're just doing life. You're trying to develop a relationship with Christ, understand what His will is for your life. And then in the third stage is the mature phase where you have been walking with the Lord, going through the trials and the tribulations and enjoying the successes that comes with walking with Him for 30 or 40 years. And Bob and I have been doing that. I want you to know that. And at this point in our lives, we are not trying to get our lives together. We're trying to give our lives away. And that's why we're here today, to share some of these things with you. There's 3 ways, really, that you can bless someone in their lives. You can bless them with your mouth, you can bless them with your wallet, or you can bless them with your life. You guys have blessed us by being here today. Hopefully, we're going to share some things that will bless you as well. So we're going to jump into some questions, change it back and forth. And because we both love business and we've had some modest success in that, I thought we'd start with Bob and asking him a question. We all know he's very well recognized as one of the most successful businessmen in the United States. Why don't you give us a couple of your business tenets and philosophy that we might benefit from here as we really listen to what you're talking about in regards to your business.
Okay, thank you. It's hard to follow Ray with anything. But let me tell you a couple things. First, some of you have heard me say this before. If I was starting out today, knowing everything I've learned in business over the years, I couldn't replicate the success that I've enjoyed in business over these number of years. There's no way. We were in the right place at the right time a lot of times. I call them divine appointments. Not only that, sometimes the thing you strive for, not getting it, results in great reward. Let me give you a couple of examples. We had this, early on, my dad was a geologist. I joined him. I was the 6th employee at the company. And in the middle 80s, most of you all weren't even born then, or early 80s, but the oil and gas business crashed. And that was our business. We weren't a big enough company to drill wells on our own. We didn't have the money. We counted on We'd put the deals together, and then we'd go show it to Exxon and Mobil and Arco, and they'd pay for the well, and we get a quarter carried. So the business went south. We had this prospect in Hidalgo County called South Monte Cristo. I showed it to 25 different companies and couldn't sell it. Now keep in mind, if I'd have sold it, we'd have had 25% of the field. We couldn't sell it. The leases were expiring. We sat around and we said, we can't let this thing go away. We drilled it ourselves. We owned 100% of it. Barn burn. Ended up drilling 16 wells in that field, and we owned 100% instead of 25%. So the thing we wanted didn't happen, something happened better. Okay, after that, I guess kind of the middle 80s, we thought, we got all this cash flow coming in and out of this field, we ought to go buy some production. So we went to about 6 or 7 of these auctions, and every time we bid, we were woefully short. And we were so disappointed because we bid a significant amount of money. One of them here in Dallas, we bid $180 million, and it sold for like $240 or $250. So we sat around and said, you know what? People are paying crazy stuff for oil and gas right now. Let's put it up for sale. And we did. And Texaco walks in right after their bankruptcy and pays us almost $500 million for our production. Keep in mind, that's not what we set out to buy, but we ended up selling. So that you don't plan these things. So a couple things, just quick things that I think are important. If I was starting over again, I'd say try to hit singles. You know, big deal guys generally strike out. I've seen it over and over where they're a big deal, you put a lot of money in it. We hit a lot of singles. If you hit a lot of singles, you score a lot of run. Be contrarian. I think the masses are generally not correct. Try to be contrarian. And another one's like, you know, adopt to change. Because like in my business career, things change. Like right now, what's going on, and I don't even know how AI is going to change the world that you all live in, but I know it's going to change it because technology's changed our world. In my world, you know, we used to drill single vertical wells. All of a sudden, they started drilling horizontal wells and fracking. And we were one of the first companies to adopt that technology. So number 3 is embrace change. And then I'll leave you with this last thing. A really, really wise friend of mine, an older guy who lived a lot, done a lot, gave me a really good advice. He says, you know, it's not what you don't know that'll hurt you. It's what you know for certain that ain't true that'll kill you. So Ray, you oversaw Barrow Hanley for many, many years. Barrow Hanley managed over $100 billion, and Ray took them from about $10 billion to over $100 billion. Give us some of your investing tenets.
Sure. I think one of the privileges that why I really enjoyed my career so much was that I had the chance, when you're managing a lot of money, you get to see all these public CEOs and CFOs and board of directors come to see you. They want you to buy their stocks. And so I got a real inside look to how do you do it, as well as make plenty of mistakes and also have some successes in investing. So as I was thinking about this question for you guys, I want to give you some tenets that apply to any industry. Doesn't make any difference. So the first one is that investing is extremely difficult and timing is impossible. And I bring that up today because how many are in the real estate business here? Raise your hand. Oh, gee. You guys will form a prayer group right after this, I'm sure, when I get finished with you. No, the reason is that we all go through cyclical times, and everybody wants to guess what the timing looks like. I've had old pros and young tell me, just in the case of real estate recently, well, we've got 2 more quarters before it hits the bottom, or we've got 2 more years. They don't know any more than the rest of us. Timing is absolutely impossible. But here's the insight I want to give you in regards to that. Pricing is not. Work on the price. I watched Warren Buffett in the great financial crisis of '08. He wrote an op-ed piece in the Wall Street Journal in November of '08 saying it's time to start buying American company stocks. That wasn't the bottom. It occurred in March of '09, so He was 5 months early. But later, when the market had turned and ran like crazy, everybody gave him credit for the timing of it. And he said, I never get the timing, I get the price right. So you don't always get it, but I'll give you one additional add-on to that to think about. A personal experience of mine. Many years ago, I bought Pier 1 stock right there in Fort Worth with the idea that the stock had gone from 20 to 6. So I thought most of the risk had been taken out of it. There was a great fundamental story, new management. We could go on and on about why I wanted to own it. Within the next year and a half, the stock went from $6 to 50 cents. I had clearly made a mistake at that point in terms of my timing. But I didn't sell. I didn't have near the investment courage to buy more because I just knew that it was probably going bankrupt, but I refused to give up. And here's the point I would make to you. The advantage that an individual investor has over the big professional institutions is time. You don't have to be managed on a quarterly basis. Even though you get the quarterly reports, don't do it necessarily and judge yourself. They have to be evaluated that way, like Utemco that we mentioned, but you don't. And I didn't, and I held on to the stock, and in the next year and a half, it went from 50 cents to 18, and I sold it and got a triple in a 4-year time period. Point being is I was dead wrong on the timing, but I got the investment right, and I used time to my advantage to help me. One other quick one that I'll just share with you is that leverage will shorten your time horizon. I don't know if you've heard Charlie Munger, Buffett's partner, say this before, but there's only 3 ways you go bankrupt: ladies, liquor, and leverage. Just show for the film, I didn't say that, Charlie Munger did. What I learned in leverage is, you want an embarrassing moment in your business career? How about being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal like I was for being the largest shareholder of Bear Stearns in the great financial crisis? Our firm owned more than anybody else. Now, the good news is it was only a 1% position in the portfolio. But as I talked to the chairman and the CEO in that conference call, the stock had gone from 180 to 12, and we're trying to figure out exactly what's happening. I said to him, I see that you have $12 billion in equity. How much debt do you have at this point? What I didn't realize was that the brokerage firms in the mid-2000s were leveraging their balance sheets dramatically, but at the end of the quarter, they would take it down to make themselves look like a bank, 8-to-1 leverage. The chairman was quiet. He didn't answer me for a minute. I said, how much leverage do you have? He said, I have 34 times levered, which meant he had $400 billion against $12 billion in equity. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to realize it doesn't take much for you to be out of business, and clearly Bear Stearns was. So remember, investing is extremely difficult, timing impossible, and leverage will shorten your time horizons. Okay, so much for the business. Let's jump into something else right here. Tell us, Bob, what it's like to be wealthy. One of the benefits I will tell you of being Bob's friend, but also I'm being Blake's friend, is they have got the tremendous gift of hospitality. So while they've been blessed with wealth, they share that well. But share with us some of the positives and negatives of being wealthy.
All right, I'll tell you first, I say this honestly. It's not all that it's cracked up to be. Now, given the options of wealth or poverty, I'll take wealth. But there's certain things that are really, really positive about having money. Obviously, a lot of people in this room have it. You get to go to see new and exciting things and get to play the greatest golf courses in the world. For me, I'm a kind of a deal junkie. It enabled us to be able to work on really fun, exciting deals. We're generally acquirers. We've done a few. We sold to Texaco, but 10 years ago we bought a portfolio of hotels for $1.1 billion, and it was really fun. So that kind of thing's been fun. Probably the best thing that comes from having some money is you don't have to fly on commercial airplanes. But it's no panacea, I will tell you. Being at our stage of life, it doesn't insulate you from any of the pains of life. It won't keep your marriage good. It won't keep your kids out of trouble. It won't keep your friends alive. It won't keep you from getting really, really sick, as I'll talk about in a minute. It won't keep you from dying. In summary, I think money, wealth is vastly overrated. It doesn't counter the real joys and sadnesses in life. It doesn't insulate you from any of those things. You know, one of the, I think, great things for me, being able to experience all of the, the trappings that this world has, and I have, is that you realize that they lead nowhere. Nowhere. And it reminds me of, there's a scripture in Jeremiah, many of you heard it, says, let not the wise man boast in his wisdom, or the strong man boast in his strength, or the wealthy man boast in his riches. But let him who boasts boast in this, that he knows and understands me, that I am the Lord. So anyone who thinks success will ensure happiness or wealth will ensure happiness is totally, it's a false god. It's okay. How about you, Ray?
I would say that money isn't everything, but it sure keeps the kids in touch. My son's right over there. I would say, and I clearly don't have Bob's wealth, and one of the observations is there's always somebody that's got more, right? But I have been very blessed. Our family has been. I would say it changes the venue. It changes the islands. Instead of Padre Island and Galveston Island, it's Sea Island and Amelia Island. Bob wanted me to put that plug in for his hotel. Amelia. No, and the real positive from a Christian man's viewpoint is you get to hear and see so many different opportunities of the way God is moving around the globe, and you get the privilege of hearing that and possibly even being a part of that. And that would not happen necessarily if we didn't have the wealth that we have. The negative that I would tell you is the exact same that Bob shares. We have all the exact same problems. We just can pay for the counselor a little easier than the rest of you. But I would put this in for you to think about in the framework. Howard Hendricks taught me this over at DTS many years ago as I was starting to have some success financially. And this is what he said to me, and I just would challenge you to use it as your filter as well. Everything you own is either an idol or a tool. You want to go buy the airplane? Put it through that filter and see, am I buying this airplane because I want people to notice me? Or am I going to use that for the extension of the kingdom, or both? It's a great frame of reference for you. I've used that a lot, and you really have to come to do some soul searching to go, why am I really buying this particular possession? So that's my thoughts on the wealth side. Let's jump to something else here, and this is really why we're here at Toolbox. Give us some examples, Bob, of your faith and how it was impacted and displayed in your workplace.
Okay, I want to be really clear about what faith we're talking about here, and what I'm talking about, because it's not faith in my own abilities. It's not faith in the capitalism or the American free enterprise system. We're talking about faith and work. So let me go back and just kind of set the record straight. You know, when I look around and I see life, and the first question I asked myself years ago is it possible that all this could just happen? Is that possible, really? Or is there a creator? And I just couldn't have enough faith to say this all just happened out of some planet exploding or big black hole. I felt like there's got to be a creator. And then that led me on somewhat of a search, and I came to realize who God was, who Jesus was. That Jesus came to earth. He lived here. He died on the cross for me. He rose again, and I owe him everything. So that's the faith that I believe in. So the question, how do we incorporate that in our workplace? That's a really good question, because, you know, we all live, I think most of us, if you're not in ministry, you're in a secular workforce. We have 20+ thousand associates. So how do we incorporate that? Well, I think our view is that we want to love our associates and to be servant leaders. That's how we incorporate it. If people in our business know that we love them and care for them and are servant leaders, that's how our faith plays out in the workplace. There's that verse in Matthew that says, even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve and to give his life a ransom for many. And, we debate all the time in our, how bold can we be in the company when you have, I have a Muslim girl down the hall from me that I love, but how bold, and it probably can be bolder, but I think the main tenet we try to strive to be is we want to love them and serve them as the leaders. So, Ray, give me some business tips. What would you like to share with this group?
I'm going to give you one example of where I learned a lot from the Lord in this particular circumstance. It's 1998, the end of the year. I'm about to be named the managing partner of the firm. I'm thinking about the fact that I'm going to get 25% of the profit pool, that I'm going to be running the organization, that I'm the head guy. It was all about me and how rich I possibly was going to be, the prestige that came from that as well. What happened in the next year as I'm getting ready to transition to that is that our performance was so bad at Barrow Hanley, we were dead last in the universe of money managers, both as value managers and growth stock managers. On top of that, I've got 3 partners retiring. So imagine walking into a client, their numbers stink, and you say, hey, just don't worry about the 3 guys that are leaving the firm. They didn't mean anything anyway, even though they built it. And just disregard the performance. And you've got a new guy that's taking over. We got you covered. Just keep your pension plan with us. Whether that was Major League Baseball or Coca-Cola, the list goes on and on. You know every one of our clients. And every week we got fired. Every single week. I'll never forget sitting in front of the General Motors pension group. The man who was in charge kept his back to us the entire time while my partner, senior partner, retiring, and I talked to his back. Think about that. I'm looking at my partner and going, you really know this guy well? We're going to save this account? He never turned and looked. He'd give us over the shoulder. But in essence, he wasn't going to talk to us. A week later, he fired us and took away $500 million. I watched for 18 months the firm go down the tubes. The loss of assets was dramatic. I was on my knees a lot praying, and also my pride was at stake going, I'm going to be the general manager of this firm as it goes down the tubes. What God was teaching me at that time period, and it wasn't like the light bulb went on, it took time. I felt like I was in the desert like the Israelites. What he was teaching me is that I wanted the good life. What is the good life? All that I just described, all the trappings that Bob just related to before. What God was teaching me was that the good life is not about prosperity. The good life is about proximity. The proximity to God. The nearness of God is my good. That's what he taught me in that time period. And once I grabbed hold of that concept, it's amazing how things change. The company, all of a sudden, miraculously, I got a bid for the company and I sold it. But I sold it with the idea that we wouldn't collect our money for 7 years. It turns out that was the peak of when we collected. I also was given a big chunk of money right up front, and who would call me just as I've got this money in my account and say, hey, will you come see a Young Life camp in Colorado? This guy right here. And I go up there and he shows me what is happening in Young Life. He's talking about the building of the camp, and I'm thinking to myself, Lord, I just got this money. The ink is not even dry on the check, and you want me to go build the gym. And that's what we did. And that was out of obedience. It was risky. It was scary to me. But it's exactly what the Lord had been teaching me in that time period. Let's go to another one right here. We've been giving you a couple of examples of our faith, how it ought to change your behavior. You know, the 2 most important things we all are supposed to get, and Bill Dunlap, our friend, reminds us constantly, you're supposed to love the Lord and love others, right? those are the two greatest commandments. Well, there's one additional one you need to think about is, if you're doing that, faith without works is dead. So show us in your life, Bob, how that is manifested itself in terms of the works.
Okay, well, this is a hard one because you can always second guess yourself, but there's a real paradox in life, and it's that real happiness and joy comes not from what you get, but from what you give. And it doesn't have to be money necessarily. It could be your time. It could be a nice note to somebody. It could be but giving. I think God has commanded us to, and the more you give, the happier you'll be. The happier I am. So being charitable, and I think we start with the belief that God owns it all. He owns it. We're stewards over it, but He owns it. And it makes life a lot easier when you invest $150 million in Guarantee Bank and it goes away in 6 months or 9 months, which is what we did. But the works we're involved in, especially our group, and a lot of ministries. We love being involved in ministry. We're involved in other things that we think are for the greater good too, medical research, things like that. But we've been blessed, but you know what? You don't have to have a lot of money to do that stuff. I mean, to give. I mean, it's a matter of how selfish, and I've got to tell you I'm selfish, how selfish you want to be with your time. Because time, we all get 24 hours a day. We all get the same amount of that. And it's so hard I confess I'm a selfish guy. And it's hard not to do what I want to do and to give my time away. But when I do it, I'm blessed. So Ray and I went to Cuba about 10 years ago. Ray, you've been back 7 or 8 times since then. So tell us what you learned on those trips.
I think it's really ironic because I'm looking at Jeff Swope right here, who was my neighbor across the street. And I asked Jeff to go to Bible Study Fellowship for his very first time. I told him I'd pick him up and drive him. It's funny that he gets involved in that Bible study for 7 years, or I did it for 7. He's on, your 30th year? And he asked me to go to Cuba, and Bob, and we came up with a million reasons not to go. Point being, iron sharpens iron, right? You want to help one another? So he invites us to go, and having done this quite a bit, we went with East West Ministries, where we've got the CEO, Kurt Nelson, is out there, and some others with the organization here today. The two most biggest excuses why not to go is my business really needs me, and oh gee, my wife is busy and I can't leave her. We've got to take care of the kids, right? So that happens. But we decided we'd go, and I'll never forget, right as we're in the line at American Airlines, one of the men with us on the trip, his passport page is crimped. So the lady says, you can't get into the country, so you're going to have to go get your own passport. That may take a day. You may not be able to get it. I turn to him and go, you crimp my page and I'll crimp yours. Because I have to tell you, if I can't speak for him, but it was one of the most scared moments of my life to go down to Cuba. It really was, because we're going to a communist country. We land. There is a guard with a German Shepherd right on me, asking me questions such as, does your government know you're here? Yes. Are you with a bunch of people? No, just Holt Lunsford was my wingman at that time. You had to go by twos. But it wouldn't have taken anything, and I would have rolled over and confessed and thrown them all under in seconds, because it was frightening. But once you get over that and you take that risk, there are so many divine appointments that you pray for that occur. We talked about that earlier in our prayer group. And there's some of the men that went with me on some of these. Let me give you one of my divine appointments to show you how God is with you on those journeys. I was the only grandfather on the whole trip. There's 10 men with me. So think about the odds of this. I'm the only granddad, and I get to go to a clinic with 9 women in that clinic that are all having difficult childbirth. They're all bedridden. There's 4 nurses in there, and I'm the one that gets to go in and talk to them. Now I'm an excited grandfather. I get to tell them about this bundle of joy that God has given them. Talk about how you're going to kiss all over them, how it's so fun to raise them. We're laughing, we're crying. It's just an absolute blessing that I get that chance to be with them. But then I turn to them and I say, as much as you're going to love these babies, and there were 2 women that were going to have twins, so there were 11 babies represented there. I said, as much as you're going to love those babies, and as much as I love my family, I love somebody more, and that's Jesus. And that's why I have come here to Cuba to talk to you. This is my divine appointment with you. I shared the gospel with them. They all bowed their heads to pray. The 4 nurses came in and said, can we do it with you? And the privilege of hearing them pray in their language and accepting Jesus Christ has to be one of the greatest moments of my life. God can use anybody. I just happen to be able to be used in that. That's putting my faith into works. I would encourage all of you, that's part of trying to wrestle with the command of go and make nations, go and baptize and make nations, right? In all the nations. Matthew 28, 19 through 21. We all wrestle with it. It's not a recommendation. It's not a suggestion. It's a command. So how do you do it? There's 1 of 3 ways. You either go, you send, or you do both. And he and I have chosen to do all of those. All right, let me jump to something else right here. I think this is maybe one of the best questions of the whole day right now, guys, because you could easily describe Bob as a man that has everything, but last year he got really sick. That's something he can't control. There's a lot of things he can't control, but that's not one of them. There was lots of prayers. He was 17 days in the hospital. We weren't sure he was going to make it. Many of the family and friends, it was day to day. And I would love for him to share with you what all he learned in that 1 year of recovery and rehab time period, how God worked in his life.
Yeah, thanks. You know, this is off the script, but I've just got to tell you my favorite Cuba story when we were there. So we're there, Kurt Nelson's here. We were there at East West, and I had an interpreter. Her name was Marielle, who's a rock star. So we're knocking on doors. No appointments. We just knocked on doors. And this couple comes to the door, and he's a medical doctor. He'd been sent overseas by Cuba, and so we sit down, the 2 of us, and he and his wife sitting here. And I start out with, everything's going through the interpreter, obviously. And I said, reading the verse, all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. And he sits there and goes, I said, what's going on? And the conversation, Mary turns and says, he said he's not a sinner. And I said, well, tell him about, has he ever told a lie? Does he understand what sin is? We go through this conversation for a while. And his wife, I can see his wife's just sitting there looking. And finally, after like 15 minutes, like we're going nowhere. So I told Mary, I says, ask his wife if she thinks he's a sinner. and she did, and his wife started laughing, and he started laughing. He didn't accept Christ, but I gave him a Bible as the end, and he came to me and gave me a big old bear hug. And for some reason, I think he may know Jesus today. I don't know, but it was a pretty funny story. Okay, to answer your question, this last year was, I got MRSA, which is a staph infection, in my blood. I don't know how I got it. I was actually with a group. I was supposed to play Cyprus on my birthday, and I couldn't get out of bed. So got on the airplane, flew home, couldn't walk down the steps of the airplane, literally. The pain was so intense. The MRSA got in my spine and in my heart, and I spent 17 nights in Clements Hospital and 3 months on an IV PICC line, laying at home 4 times a day, having this cocktail of antibiotics dripped into my system. The R in MRSA is resistant. It's a resistant staph, resistant to antibiotics. And interesting part of this, halfway through my hospital stay, they thought they had it under control. They sent me home. And the MRSA broke through the blood, broke through the antibiotic, and I started shaking, and my wife calls the Highland Park, the ambulance comes to get me. I was on so much pain medication and in so much pain. I don't remember a lot of these things, but the thing I remember, and I've never even told him this, he's sitting here, the thing I remember distinctly is I'm laying in bed just shaking, is that Blake shows up at the house, and he grabs me, and he prayed for me. And I remember every word of his prayer. And it's like miraculous. And it was life-changing. And you know what? I had so many people praying for me. It was unbelievable. So there's a couple things. This verse in Philippians says, be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication, with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. I can swear to you before God and you, the whole 120 or 90 days I was severely sick, but I never had an anxious day, not once. I had this picture that I was going towards the cliff, and maybe was going to go over it. But I had a picture of the Lord at the bottom catching me. I felt like, you know what? If I go over the cliff, it's going to be okay. And I don't know how close I came. It was probably pretty close. But I was so calm, and it was so reassuring, and it's changed the way I think about today. Like most of you young guys particularly, I was always living in the future. Do this deal, go do this, go do that, go do that. Always 3 months, 6 months. You're living, what's going to happen to this? And I learned that you better enjoy today. Every day is a gift. And I've learned to much more live in the present than I ever did my whole life. And I wished I'd learned this lesson. I'm not glad that this happened to me. Believe me, I would never want to go through it again. I couldn't walk, I couldn't walk from here to Ray. I couldn't even stand up it was excruciating pain. And I don't want to do it again, but there's ways that I'm thankful for it. I learned so much that it was, in some ways, it was a blessing. And this other verse that kind of went through my mind a lot, it says, it's in 2 Corinthians, do not be discouraged, for while your body is wasting away, your spirit is being renewed day by day. For this light, momentary affliction is preparing for us an eternal weight of glory which is beyond all comparison, as we look not to the things that are seen, but the things that are unseen. The things that are seen are temporary. The things that are unseen are eternal. So I learned a lot. If you've ever been in a situation like where you really, and also, I'm not sure I was ever really afraid of dying. I'm sure not anymore. God's got us here He's got a plan for all of us. And I don't fear death, and I know that He's there. And I'd just like to say one other thing. Thank you for all of you here who prayed for me. He literally, I think my life, I think me being here right now is a miracle from Him, and I'm thankful. So, okay, Ray, we're going to talk about identity, the importance of knowing who we are.
So we all, from our very birth, tried to figure out who we are, right? And let's just take high school, for example. Are you on the debate team or on the golf team? That's what I was on. Are you a football player? You're being identified. Are you a cheerleader? Do you date the prettiest girl? What home do you live in? Think about your identity from what college you go to what job you take. We all are joining tribes, right? We join a tribe. And we don't necessarily, it's not one. And if you leave the tribe doesn't really like the fact you might leave. Let's look at our own mayor leaving the Democratic Party as they blasted him. We're trying to figure out, where do we fit into that? And, it can be, am I a Republican, Democrat? Am I a vacciner? Am I not a vacciner? There's all sorts of ways that we identify ourselves. And I had the privilege of interviewing Roger Staubach years ago, and I thought I'd just share this story with you. Staubach was invited over to Israel. Robert Kraft, the owner of the New England Patriots, he invited 28 former players and their wives. And so Staubach tells the story about how he's in the elevator with his wife and with Joe Montana. And he's got a big name tag on, just as Joe Montana does. The elevator door opens up. Montana walks off, and a young Israeli guy gets on. And he stares right at Staubach's name tag, looks at it. Then he turns back around as the elevator's going up, and then he turns back to Staubach and he goes, "Hey, do you know who that was that just got off the elevator?" Staubach plays along and he says, no, I don't. And he goes, that was Joe Montana, famous Super Bowl quarterback, 4-time champion here in Israel. How cool is that? Staubach says, yeah, that's really cool. Elevator keeps on going up. Guy turns back around. He looks at Staubach's name tag again, studies it for a second. He goes, hey, are you that Dallas real estate guy? We all have different identities, right? And they change. Staubach was actually very pleased that he had been identified, but we all know he is a Christian man. So I guess the question I would just ask you is, who or what do you allow to identify and tell you who you are, other than your own Creator, the one who loves you, the one that has made you? And I think that is really an important point to think about, because we see so many examples of people that are trying to figure out who they are. I'm going to stick on football analogies because I'm going to talk about quarterbacks. I'll stop with this one, but Tom Brady at the age of 27 won his third Super Bowl. 27 years old, his third Super Bowl, and he was interviewed on 60 Minutes. I watched the interview, and they said, well, what are you thinking? And Brady said, there's got to be more than this. The guy said, well, what's the answer? He goes, I don't know, but there has to be more than this. What we typically do as men is that we keep trying to pursue what we think is going to fill our hearts. Brady adds 4 more Super Bowls, but it might be you work harder, you chase more women, you drink more whiskey, whatever it is. We're trying to do anything other than put Jesus to fill our complete heart. And that is what I'm trying to convey to you. That's where your identity ought to be, in Jesus. Let's go to another one, Bob, right here. We feel strongly that the most important aspects at this time of our life is to teach the next generation. Why don't you share with the audience kind of what you're doing as your faith has matured and how you're doing that?
Well, first, I'll confess a failure. I think to not having lived a life that was as bold as I could have or should have for the Lord. We all have a lot of opportunities, and I can't tell you how many times I think back and say, I had an opportunity there and I didn't take advantage of it. And I'm not plagued with guilt over that. I'm just confessing to you that I don't want to miss those opportunities. I don't want to miss those divine appointments. And in life, I want the crown to be on the Lord. But I often jerk it off and put it on business or other things. You know what I'm saying? Keeping Him the King is consistently, I think, a fight we all have. But I want to be available. We do things. We've been having some Bible studies with some of the Lance and some of the groups. I want to be available. One of the reasons we're doing this, I think the answer to this is we're here today, right?
Yep, exactly.
We want to be available. And I'd like to. If any of you guys have questions, we're available. I want to be available. And I think if you look around our country right now, and the culture that we're experiencing today, if we're not bold, we're in bad shape. It's people that know the Lord and love Him. It's the only hope we have. When I look at the way God made man in the plans, He made mankind to flourish in the family. The family is His basic unit. And if we don't, that's what leads to prosperity. And so I want to spend, I think Ray and I, our groups, we want to spend time being bold and being available and, giving ourselves away. So, Ray, how about you? We talk about teaching the young diligently. I've got 8 grandkids. You've got 14. Talk to us
It's the only thing I have more than him, just so you know. This is one of the subjects that I think is so important for us to focus in on. Many years ago, just like in a setting like this, I got to listen to Chuck Swindoll, former DTS president, author of 50, 60 books at least, Stonebriar pastor, a real godly man, mature. And he taught me, just as Bob and I are sharing with you some of nuggets of wisdom, he taught me Deuteronomy 6. And I put the lesson on my whiteboard inside my closet, and I looked at it for at least 10 years. Fear the Lord greatly was right there at the very top. Trust the Lord completely, teach the young diligently, and love the Lord fervently. So every morning I got up and looked at those. 3 of those are about me and the Lord. One of them is teaching the young diligently. So what does that mean? I used to have this client, his name is Tim McClure, when I was a stockbroker. He is the M of GSD&M. You may know that famous advertising firm in Austin. They did Shamu the Whale and on Southwest Airlines. He's also known for Don't Mess with Texas. And he was telling me about teaching his daughter. She was in the 6th grade. He sent her to Spanish class in Austin. And it's the first day of class for this little 6th grade girl, and the teacher says, does anybody know Spanish? She raised her hand. And the teacher said, well, what do you know? She said, well, bebidas para todos mis amigos porque mañana cabalgamos la amanecer. Teacher kind of smiled, and the kids all said, well, what'd she say? What'd she say? The teacher said, well, she said, drinks for all my friends, for tomorrow we ride at dawn. She said, where did you learn that? She goes, well, my dad walks around the house drinking beer, saying it all the time. Seriously, though, we are to be the spiritual heads of the household. That is our responsibility. And I just challenge you, do you pour into your teaching of being the spiritual head the same way you pour into the efforts you do at work? I didn't. I'm not sure I do to this day, but I'm trying. My wife laughs all the time because when I decided I was going to do this, I went out and bought a book on my first devotional. You know what the name of it was? Prayers for Dummies. She has not let me forget, and she still will hold that book. I keep throwing it away. She keeps bringing it back to remind me where we've come from. But there's so many opportunities for you guys to grow in your faith walk. You know, DTS is an absolute gold mine right here with free classes. There's the Better Man organization. There's East West. There's so many ministries that you can get involved with to try to understand, exactly how you want to do this. Let me give you one practical example just for you to think about. We just had the eclipse, right? 80% eclipse right here in Dallas. How many of you took your kids or your grandkids out and showed them the eclipse? A few. So think about this. The eclipse is God's way of showing you that He holds all things in His hands. Why do the planets not collide? Why do the moon and sun not collide? It's an opportunity to share with the children about who He is. That He is the creator of all things. It's right there visible in front of you. And why do I bring that up? Because April the 8th of next year is 100% eclipse. It's so easy. Psalm 19, C.S. Lewis said, the great famous atheist turned religious author, he said that Psalm 19 is maybe the greatest poem of all time. The heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of His hands. Day by day they pour forth speech. It goes on and on. It's right there in front of you for you to share. So I would tell you to do that. Albert Schweitzer said, and I think about this often, example isn't the main thing to influence others. It's the only thing. Be the spiritual heads of the household, guys. Okay, we talk about the value of small groups. You want to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll go real quick. We've been in a small group with a couple of these guys here, Bill, Jeff, and for 15, 16, 17 years. We meet every Monday morning. It's been one of the most valuable things in my life. And I would encourage you to find a group to live spiritual lives with. But you got to be real careful because you got to have a group that you can trust, and you got to be able to be transparent. Now, I have friends, some of you all probably do too. They were in Bible studies or groups I'm in for years and years and years. And all of a sudden, this guy's getting a divorce. Well, he never said one word about it to anybody in his group. And if that's the way it's going to be, don't bother. Because we're real transparent. Like, if Ray says something to me, said, please keep this in the group, we don't tell anybody, and he doesn't have to worry about it. But also, we're real transparent about, they know what a schmuck I am. I know what a schmuck they all are. And we're,
Hey.
but we're real honest with each other. It's been so valuable. I would highly encourage you to find a group to share your life with, a smaller group, not 20, 10 or under, where you can, and we've all did Bible studies forever. You know what we do? We come and we talk about life, each person, and we pray. If you told me 20 years ago we're going to pray for 30 or 40 minutes, I'd say, stick me with a cattle prod, and now we just love it. We love it. So it's great. So we're going to wrap up here pretty quick. Ray, talk about living life fast or living life slow.
So I was just reading an article that said that the two fastest paced cities in the world are Tokyo and right here. You guys are at warp speed. Bob and I know what that looks like. It is a fast-paced life in Dallas. Give you a couple examples, though, for you to think about. It might help you remind what we're trying to emphasize as being in the present. Is that Tiger Woods won the Masters. He's walking off the green, his first green jacket. The reporter said to him, "What were you thinking about on that 18th green? Your first Masters?" He said, "I was thinking about the fact that I left myself a tough 6-foot putt." He was in the moment. He was present at that time. I used to do yoga, and the yogis, the real instructors, will say that the human mind is like a drunken monkey being stung by scorpions. Think about that. It's everywhere. It's all over the place. I'm sure every one of you in here has wandered at some point as Bob and I have been talking. That's just what we do. The point, though, of why you do yoga is to bring yourself to a calming point and to get to the present moment, to understand that. Our God reminds us, he says, "Be still and know that I am God," right? You can't do that at warp speed. He's not the great I was. He's not the great I will be. He is the great I am. And in order for you to be connected to him, you have to stay in the present. I would so strongly encourage you to do that. And the way you do this is that he sees you and he hears you and he loves you. You need to return it exactly the same way. And that model can be done with him as well as with your children and with your wife. Okay, we're to the last question right here. What's your legend going to be? What do you want it to be?
Well, I don't want to be remembered as a rich guy, as billionaire Bob. I want to be remembered as a really good husband, a really good dad, a really good friend, a charitable guy who loved Jesus. And I want to be able to, when my days are over, I want to be able to go before my master, and I want to hear the words, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's what I pray my legacy is.
So Bob and I had the privilege of doing the University of Texas commencement speech to the MBA class years ago. We did it separately. And for me, right before I was doing it, there were 3,000 people in the Gregory Gym auditorium. Right before I went on, I got an email note from Sandy Leeds, probably the most popular professor at the McCombs Business School, and it said, "Dear Ray, I understand that you're doing the commencement speech. That's great. Furthermore, I want you to know I will be sitting right behind you on stage, and if you don't say something that significantly changes my life in the first few minutes, I'm going to boo your you-know-what off the stage." Another example is Billy Crystal. You may have seen the movie City Slickers. He's 40 years old. It's an old movie. He's turning 40. He's trying to figure out life in general. He goes on a trail ride with a couple of buddies. And on that trail ride, he's talking to the old ranch hand, Curly. And Curly says to him, "Do you know what the secret of life is?" And he goes, I don't. Crystal wants to know, what is it? Curly holds up one finger and he says, it's this. He goes, it's one thing. Crystal says, well, what is it? He said, well, that's for you to figure out. Bob and I figured out that a long time ago, what the secret of life is. It's a personal and intimate relationship with Jesus Christ. We know that you have 1 million decisions in your life to make, right? We do them every single day. Who do I marry? Where am I going to live? What job am I going to take? What am I going to eat? Am I going to get a haircut, not get a haircut? Whatever those decisions happen to be, we make 1 million of them, but only one of them has eternal implications. What did I do with Jesus? Bob and I both know that Jesus promises an abundant life of joy and peace and love. But in order to receive that, you have to get off your own throne, as Bob mentioned, and let Him sit on your throne of life. Thanks, folks, for having us. We really appreciate it.